Hello, this is Mike Nelson from SUSE. At SUSE, I am the business development manager for our North American market and pay particular attention to the SAP market. I'll be moderating today's webinar. So with that, let's get started. The title for the webinar today is Let's Get Real. Your SAP cloud strategy has turned into a hybrid one, and that's okay. So with a lot of debate about what the title should be, we came up with this to reflect really what's on the minds of a lot of people today in the SAP infrastructure workplace, and we'll get right into it. So again, I'm Mike Nelson with SUSE, and just a quick introduction about SUSE. Our company has been around for 25 years. We're an independent open source software company with deep roots to SAP and with a real deep commitment to serving SAP customers. We'll get into sort of what SUSE does if you're not familiar with our company as we go here. And with that, I'll just get started. So the latest market research concerning cloud usage plans and deployment models and investments indicates that the majority of enterprises have started their migration processes, their migration of business application workloads to the cloud. A large portion of these enterprises are expected to maintain a hybrid solution for at least the next 24 to 36 months after they get started. In fact, research from Gartner indicates that 72% expect a hybrid cloud will eventually be their primary cloud usage model. This has actually been verified with a North American poll that we did using the ASUG, the America's SAP User Group team, to sort of verify and validate that. So in this webinar, panelists will be discussing the benefits of a hybrid cloud approach, challenges to consider when planning for an SAP environment in a hybrid landscape, and then choosing the right infrastructure for your operation. So really kind of top level considerations and then some nuts and bolts, and we hope that you find that useful. I'd like to introduce you to our panelists today, Michael Tabrin from SUSE and Tyler Constable from Syslink Xandria. Why don't we start with Tyler? Just do a quick intro, Tyler. Thanks.
Great. Sure, yeah. And Mike, thanks for having us today. My name is Tyler Constable. I'm the Director of Sales Engineering for Syslink Xandria. Syslink Xandria is a software solution for the SAP monitoring, management, and automation, whether on-premise, in cloud, or in a hybrid model.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler. Michael, why don't you go next?
Okay, thanks, Mike, and hello, everyone. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager with global responsibility for messaging and marketing materials at SUSE as far as solutions for SAP environments.
Great, great. So just to remind everyone, this is a live discussion, panel discussion. Please send us your questions as we go here and use the question box on the right on your screen. We'll try to address as many of these questions as time permits, and then within reason, we'll answer your questions if they haven't been covered here separately in email if we've got your email address. So thanks again. So let's start at the beginning. There are many companies are planning to use a hybrid landscape today, it seems. Or do you guys think this is a temporary situation? Tyler, why don't you start us off there?
Sure, yeah, so as cloud adoption was slowly growing in its infancy stages, we saw a lot of organizations that were bringing just non-production workloads over to the cloud and leaving production workloads still in the environment. However, what we now see is the organizations, now that production has become more widely spread into the cloud, organizations that take one landscape and move it over and keep everything else still as a different. Hey, Mike, I don't know if maybe we should. I see your screen still.
Oh yeah, let me get rid of that.
Okay.
All these emails. Yeah. Let's.
Yeah, Mike, you should have stopped sharing.
I just stopped. Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Go to webinar newbie. Sorry, guys.
So yeah, no, so as I was saying, so as cloud adoption has become more widely spread, we now see different landscapes being moved over instead of between workloads of production and non-production. And as that's continuing to grow, we've seen more and more organizations push more and more to the cloud, and some organizations taking everything, but honestly, where a lot of people end up is in a hybrid deployment. That can be for various sets of reasons, some of which we'll talk on today. So yeah, I think what happens is organizations consider moving everything to the cloud, but as they get the ball rolling, there can be many, many factors. What ends up happening is we have a hybrid environment.
Great, thanks, Heather. Michael, why don't you take a shot at that same question?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with Tyler on that one. SAP has had this really strong focus on leveraging the cloud for service delivery. So it's not really surprising. A lot of organizations will start with saying, I'm going to plan a cloud strategy. But then when the reality of having to balance the needs for greater flexibility and agility against the concerns about mission critical and business sensitive data getting outside the firewall, suddenly it becomes more of a hybrid strategy. You'd mentioned earlier, Mike, about the survey that we sponsored with ASUG, the America's SAP User Group, and it showed in that survey that, of the SAP users who've already migrated to S/4HANA today, about half of them are on premise, 6% are in the 5 or 6% in the public cloud, and about 30% have a hybrid landscape. But over the next couple of years, there's really this strong trend toward much fewer on-premise implementations, probably getting down into the single digits, with hybrid implementations becoming the majority of them. So hybrid does seem to be where most organizations are headed today.
Okay. Well, on that note, what do you think the key challenges are that every company should consider when planning for a hybrid landscape? Michael, why don't you address that first?
Well, I think there are three key challenges, at least from an infrastructure perspective. First, I think a lot of customers need to understand what their high availability requirements and options are.
Okay.
ASUG has done other research indicating that about 90% of SAP users find that high availability and disaster recovery are either extremely or very important to their service delivery. And that is consistent, as you know, with what a lot of our customers are telling us.
Yeah, that really makes sense.
Yeah, and of course, it's not really surprising. SAP systems are usually mission critical. So automating, especially in the SAP HANA environment, automating that system failover is really important to shortening the duration of any service outages. And there are a number of different ways to do that depending on how little downtime you can tolerate and what your budget is. Second, I think you need to spend time with your business lines. Make sure you understand what their service delivery needs are for availability and service delivery. And that's going to be especially true when they've already gone rogue and they've started delivering service working with hyperscalers directly on their own. So it's a great opportunity to kind of take that control and perform the due diligence and making sure that you can meet everyone's needs, both today and also giving yourself the flexibility to meet future needs. And then third, as SAP delivers more and more of their solutions with open source technologies, making sure that the strategy that you're building and the technology choices you're making are aligned with theirs. So for example, the cloud strategy, you want to make sure that's consistent with what the standards that SAP is driving in the Cloud Foundry. You don't want to get locked into one vendor software stack, and that includes ours, unless it's aligned with what SAP is doing.
Okay, that all bodes well and makes good sense. Tyler, why don't you take a
Sure, and I agree a lot with what Michael just stated. The availability definitely a key concept. And on top of that, when you talk about challenges, it also can start before we even start our cloud journey in your planning stages. Things like how is the system behaving right now from your source system standpoint? How are the systems communicating with each other? Are they what kind of processing times are you having? Also from an end user perspective, what are your sizing and your sizing trends as you grow? All that needs to be taken into consideration, because as you kind of take this apart and move different systems and migrate them to different areas, there's going to be a handful of challenges that come up. But if you don't have good insights as to where you were from a health perspective, from an end user perspective, from a business processing perspective, you don't have a good grasp of where that is beforehand, you're going to have a very hard time troubleshooting post-migration.
So are there key considerations for ensuring smooth operations when an organization is looking into working in a hybrid setup? Once that's all done, what kind of things should folks be thinking about? How about Michael this time?
Okay. Well, I'd say a key consideration is managing configurations and maintaining security of your infrastructure and making sure that's consistent both on-premise and in the cloud. Now, one advantage of SAP's open source approach is that you do get a broad choice of solutions, but again, you want to make sure that management stack that you choose has the capabilities uh, for those, specifically for SAP environments, and that is capable of managing across more than just a single platform or a single cloud implementation. And if you're moving some of your on-premise SAP systems to the cloud, then ideally you want to try to continue using those same management tools. But if your current management tools won't work for hybrid deployments, then evaluate options that minimize the new skills and tools that are required to maintain both of those environments together.
Okay. And Tyler.
Yeah, so from a just a technical take on this, from a network perspective, this is maybe a little bit more complex than where you're coming from. Depending, some organizations have fairly complex networks in place, some don't. So this might be a new challenge when we talk about vulnerabilities and latency. So we need to take networking into consideration when building out a hybrid environment. Also, from an employee challenge perspective, if your employees are used to just on-premise management, there will be a little bit of a learning curve as they move into the cloud environment. And the flip side as well, I'm not saying you can't just go out and hire some cloud knowledge employees. However, knowing the full stack all the way down through the hardware and the infrastructure layer for things that are still on premise. So there might be a little bit of a learning curve there, either way, whichever way it is that you'll have to consider. And then lastly, we get into business process monitoring and understanding how any process works, whether it is on-prem or in the cloud, but more specifically from a hybrid perspective. What does that mean? You don't want to take an organization, you don't want to have a tool set that is going to be looking and monitoring and managing just your cloud aspects, and a second one that's going to be watching your on-premise. That's going to be a nightmare to manage. So you want to make sure that you've got a tool set in place that can grab information and absorb it from both areas and give you a single pane of glass to help manage that environment.
So I guess it seems like the more you know, the better off you are. What else is new, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Right. So, hey, following on that, so we've talked about sort of the considerations and what to look out for. Let's move on to benefits. Are there special benefits, special, goodness that comes from running in a hybrid setup if you were to choose that path? So, Michael, why don't you give us SUSE's perspective on that?
Well, I think there are definitely some benefits to running in a hybrid environment. If you set it up the right way, and by right way, I mean, again, you're not working with a completely different set of tools and processes, making life more difficult for your IT administrators because you have service delivery both on-premise and in the cloud. I think having the flexibility of being able to choose which infrastructure elements are best kept in your internal infrastructure versus the cloud, that makes a big difference. And then, for some projects, you may choose to go totally on premise or maybe totally in the cloud, but you've already got those consistent internal processes defined and you've already got relationships with your favorite hyperscaler already in place. So just having flexibility, I think, makes a big difference.
Perfect. And Tyler, Syslink's perspective on that question.
Yeah, I have to echo what Michael said. Flexibility is a key point here. If you're currently not in a hybrid and you're just on premise, again, depending on what your architecture is, this may give you some other opportunities into high availability, making sure that these systems are alive for the end business, no matter what's going on in your on-premise data center. Really gives you some great advantages on things you may not have had available to you prior to your hybrid environment.
So it's multifaceted. It's not just about saving money or maintaining control. It's just optimizing the business is why you would go down this path. And I assume you guys would both agree that different outcomes, different proportions of on-prem to public cloud would be appropriate depending on the company you're in, the enterprise you're in, and the maybe even the location you're in. So.
Yeah, and perhaps even the workload within that company or location.
Okay. I know that we see some of our customers quickly moving to a proven private cloud solution, or public cloud solution, I should say, and then sort of trying to understand at that point if they have the technical chops, the technical ability to own and operate their own private cloud, knowing that the public cloud folks have figured it out, but it can be pretty expensive to run that way. Wanting to bring in some control and some cost there, they've undertaken setting up private clouds, and then they will next figure out which workloads belong where. So I know that's a common thread here, at least in the North America market. So next, what considerations should enterprises take into account when regarding their migration and system hardening and security policies? So on to sort of best practices for data security and security of the enterprise. How about Tyler? You start here.
Sure. So just from a best practices perspective, whether this is a migration to the cloud or really any kind of project in the SAP world, there are a handful of components that during that technical project are going to have to be opened up and then need to be shut back down. And it's always that shut back down and close back up, which cause nightmares 6 months down the road when you have your audit and you say, oh yeah, we forgot to close those things up. So that's things like the SAP admin credentials that have to get opened up, making things set to modifiable, having clients opened up. All of those security perspectives that hopefully, it won't be a concern from a security perspective, may also be a concern from an audit perspective. That also goes a little bit further into each organization has their own policies around password length and how many characters in a password and numericals and everything. Yeah. All of that is going to be in your audit as well. And if those don't get migrated when you're taking this first step into your hybrid environment, that migration into the cloud environment, that may lead to some very some nightmares. It could be within a year down the road. So from a system hardening perspective, that's this is something that always gets forgotten about when we talk about migrations, is locking everything back down before the system gets handed back off to the business during that technical part of the migration.
And I think there's ever more oversight over just that kind of thing. Just what the policies are has a lot of oversight, and then whether they're enforced and followed, I think is ever tightening. So, Michael, how about SUSE's perspective on that question?
Well, I think from an infrastructure perspective, we need look at OS security patches. I mean, whether you're running Windows or Linux, that's always kind of an unpleasant reality, and it's especially problematic for SAP systems that you're literally running your business on. So, on the one hand, you can't risk the security of your operations, but you also can't afford the downtime to apply kernel patches. So this is why we're starting to see more and more SAP customers deploying live patching of the Linux kernel to fix the security vulnerabilities in a way that's not so disruptive to the business. You don't want to slow down performance, you don't want to interrupt your SAP services, but you want to make sure that they're secure. Another area that we've looked at working with some customers is making sure that the SAP HANA in-memory system itself is secure. So having, for example, a firewall around that, and any storage systems that are off-premise, especially whether they're in the cloud or they're at a third-party infrastructure provider, making sure that you've got encryption and a way of encrypting and decrypting that as needed.
So I'm familiar with the live patching capability of SUSE and some of the hardening tools that we offer, but maybe you could just share just a quick synopsis of what live patching enables. I see that as being a really interesting thing for a lot of SAP customers.
Yeah, live patching is one of those things that it's a technology that allows you to basically bypass a security issue that's in the code. And it's going to be with a fix that's been validated by the open source community. So it's not like literally rewriting the kernel. Rather, it's creating the software patch that works around the problem and does it in a way that doesn't disrupt the bit. There are no hits to performance, no downtime associated with it. And I know there are people who have concerns about it, but you want to make sure that you apply it in a dev and test environment, just like you would any other change before you push it into production.
Perfect. Okay, good description of that. So when could you declare a migration to be a success? This is one of those things we noodled about before we started on this project to create a webinar. But I'm curious about what you guys think about sticking a flag in it and saying, we're done. This has been a success. How about Tyler? You start with this one.
Sure. I love this question because I always laugh because it depends who you ask, right? So if you ask the technical team that's actually doing the data migration, as soon as that database is stood up without any corruption, they're going to say, hey, we did the hard part. This is over. But then you ask the functional team, they say, well, let's let the business use it for a couple hours or a couple days a week, and let's get their thoughts. But then you also ask someone like the CFO, and they're not going to say anything until month-end closing runs at least a couple times. So really, it could be from the technical perspective, it's right away. Is the system ready to be handed off to the business? This is up to upper management is going to say, well, let's see how this actually works, and are we getting the same performance we had before? Is everything working all the way through those workloads like month-end processing that aren't going to happen? Hopefully not day one out of the gate with a migration.
Sure. Okay, that makes good sense too. Michael, what do you say from the SUSE side?
Yeah, I would agree. You've got to take a total company perspective on this. Your IT staff wants to have less work. They want to see automation. They want to have consistent processes. While the business lines, ideally, they're getting more work done. They're getting faster service delivery. They're getting real-time access to the data. Everything works as it did before, but even better. So certainly having, as Tyler says, that broad perspective across the company, I think you got to have all of that before you can declare a migration a success.
Okay, good. Yeah, that's a tricky one because everybody, of course, will have a different answer, and different management teams will have different abilities to accept that declaration. Okay, so the last question of our, for the panelists, and then we'll move on to the live questions, the panel questions for the panel. Apologies. What's the most important advice you would have for someone considering or starting the migration to a hybrid landscape? So how about Michael, you start on this one.
Okay, I think probably one of the most important things to do is to go ahead and start gaining experience now, starting with your non-critical SAP systems and maybe some new implementations rather than trying to migrate existing production systems. I was at an IBM conference recently where I heard a speaker point out that if you wait until SAP's deadline to transition to S/4HANA, then the most skilled consultants and integrators won't have the resources available, or they might be prohibitively expensive. It really does take time and planning to understand the skills and the processes and things that you need to change in your infrastructure. And you want to have the opportunity to try and maybe even fail with a non-critical solution or a non-critical implementation or something that's new that you're trying to start up. Refine your plan, make sure that you can show some success without disrupting your critical operations. And then as your teams get up to speed on the skills that they need to support the open source technologies and that SAP is promoting, then you can identify any additional skills that you need in terms of consulting or maybe help with critical operational issues, filling skills gaps. So really it's all about going ahead and getting started now and making sure that you, when you need these capabilities for the future environments, that you're ready.
Of course, some of our audience is going to say, well, of course that's going to be your answer. You're a vendor, right? But I've heard the same thing. I heard another consultant say there are only a few hundred people in the world who are expert in moving Unix to Linux workloads for business critical apps and who make a business of that, who sell their time to do those projects. And they're not all going to have time on their dockets in 2024, right? So
Right.
that's kind of what it comes down to. How about Tyler? What's the most important advice you'd give?
Yeah, I touched on it briefly a couple of questions ago, but I think it's worth bringing up again is the fact that when you're working in a hybrid environment, the last place you want to be is having multiple tool sets managing each environment. You don't want to have a tool set that's going to be meant for monitoring and managing your on-premise and a separate one that's going to be monitoring and managing your cloud infrastructure. That's going to be a lot of overhead. Your team's going to have to be bouncing between two different environments trying to figure out what's going on, whether it's performance issues or just keeping an eye on the system, make sure everything's humming along. So want to make sure that you're selecting the tool sets that can absorb data from both environments, give you a single pane of glass, also allow you to manage outbound as well. So you can go into one tool set, take action, set up automation, no matter where that system is, whether it's in the cloud or it's on premise or in a third-party provider, it's all coming into one solution. So, really giving you I guess the ability to fall asleep peacefully at night, knowing you're not going to have to, if something bad pops up, you're not going to have to bounce between all these different systems trying to figure out what's going on.
Right. Good. Well, I think that wraps up the sort of the staged bit of this. And thank you for answering all those questions. I think the perspectives from both companies are important as SAP customers sort of look at what's next here. Let's move on to some of the questions that have been asked during the webinar here. First, and I don't know who this will be for, but let me read the question first and we'll decide. My organization is considering moving to the cloud and we're looking to migrate to HANA as well. I've heard you may be able to do both at the same time. What are your thoughts or experiences? Maybe Tyler, I think this may be closest to home for you.
Sure, I can take this one. Yeah, absolutely. So, what this person's going through is not abnormal. A lot of organizations take the time when they're going to move to the cloud to move to HANA or vice versa, if they're both in their roadmap over the next couple of years. Reason being, I think is from a technical perspective, it's one migration, but even part of what's more relevant is all of the testing. As you go through these migrations, you're doing development, quality, production. That's a lot of testing that's going on for both the team and the business, especially post go live. So I think a lot of organizations are migrating, or I should say, merging these two projects together into one really helps cut down the amount of time in the long run that is spent on just testing alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Good. Okay. I think that probably plus some research from both our websites. The person who asked that question may find a deeper dive answers, and please feel free to reach out to us if we can answer that in a more comprehensive manner. So here's another one. Michael mentioned that there are several ways to automatically fail over SAP HANA systems. Can you tell me what they are? So I guess it's obvious who will answer that one.
Yeah, okay. Well, of course, SAP HANA is designed to automatically replicate SAP HANA data over into a backup system. That's part of the way that SAP designed the system. What SUSE did was develop and validate 4 different ways of making that whole process automated. So they're basically called a scale up, performance optimized, scale up, cost optimized, scale out, and multi-tenant. And so briefly, here's the difference between those. For the performance optimized scenario, you have a secondary system that's automatically kept in sync with the system replication. And so it will immediately come up, giving you the shortest recovery time in the event of a primary system failure. For the cost optimized scenario, that secondary system can be used for something else, maybe for dev or test or some other non-critical workload. But you're going to have to halt it in the event of that primary system outage, which it saves the cost of having a dedicated backup system, but the recovery time is longer because you have to wait for the SAP HANA data to be reloaded. And then the scale out scenario fails over the entire SAP HANA cluster, which has some built-in redundancy, so that if one node fails, there's an additional node that can take over. But if multiple nodes fail, then you can use this scenario to fail over the entire cluster.
That's great, Michael. I know that scale out technique is used primarily, maybe predominantly, in business warehouse situations. Although there are some ERP workloads now with some HANA databases growing to such an extent that scale out is being used for S4 as well. Okay, that's great. How about the next question? What's the impact of not moving to the cloud or remaining in a hybrid setup for the long term? Tyler, why don't you grace us with an answer to this one?
Sure. I think I hate to give the consultant answer on this, but by impact, impact may be a positive thing. running in a hybrid environment is not a bad thing by any means. So I think if you end up halfway through your journey of what you expect to move everything to the cloud and you end up in a hybrid environment, I wouldn't be too concerned about that. There are many reasons why having workloads still on premise can be a good thing, whether it's a cost perspective, it's a data and governance perspective, what have you. So I think the impact is positive. You know, in the long run, if your goal is to get everything to the cloud, maybe it's an IT business project to get all workloads off of on-prem, then obviously, you know, you'll have to work through that. But overall, if required to have even legacy data, just that sitting on-prem, I don't think that should be viewed negatively.
Okay, that's great. One last question, and this will be for Michael, I guess. What are the open source technologies that SAP is leveraging for its solutions? This comes up a lot, so I'm not surprised this was a question from the audience.
Yeah, well, in addition to Linux, of course, which is the only operating system for SAP HANA, some of the key technologies that SAP is adopting right now are Ceph and OpenStack, and you can see those in their implementation of SAP Cloud Platform, and Kubernetes, which is used as part of the SAP Data Hub, which of course can only be deployed in a container. They did also start an open source project called Gartner, which is a solution for Kubernetes clusters as a service. And SAP, of course, by the way, is a founding platinum member of the Cloud Foundry. I mentioned that earlier. So they're contributing to a number of different open source projects there. So these are the technologies that I was talking about. You want to make sure you're aligning your implementations to.
I think I saw at Sapphire, someone made a claim in one of the sessions that SAP has as many open source developers, you know, working both on the clock and off the clock as many of the companies that call this our business. So, you know, hundreds and hundreds of SAP engineers are at least part-time workers on open source projects. So that's got to be a good thing for everyone.
Yeah, if you go out and look at the Cloud Foundry website, you can see there are probably about 10, 12 different projects that SAP is working on.
That's terrific. I would like to thank our panelists today, and thank you especially to Tyler and Syslink Xandria, including Arit, for having sort of prompted this whole affair, and thank you to Michael for answering the questions from the SUSE perspective. As I mentioned before, if you've got questions that you would like to ask, I'll give you the address for those today. crc@suse.com. crc@suse.com can be used to ask questions. You can find information about SUSE, of course, at www.suse.com. And on the Syslink side, learn more at syslink.ch and www.syslink-xandria, xandria.com. That'll do it for today. Thanks everyone for attending.